Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. There it is. I can see I'm live now. Like all the waiting for YouTube to get its thing in gear. The least professional stream there is. Howdy, folks. We're gonna give a few moments for folks to get in here. Let notifications go out. Hopefully they go out. Has anybody noticed I think it's like the last 2 weeks especially, YouTube is showing a lot of older videos, possibly even a lot of stuff you've already watched. So what I've noticed is, especially the last like week, I'm seeing videos that are all like 2 weeks to a month old that I've seen before, that it's like re-putting in all my suggestions, and a lot of new content that comes out from a lot of the creators that I have like all notifications set on for just aren't showing up. So I've had to go hunt stuff down, which is a little weird. I don't know what the old Uncle YouTube's doing, but it's doing something. It's doing something. All right. It's just my psychotic observation. So some updates before we get into my topic, which might be a little interactive with chat. So next week will be my club's holiday party, and I'm I'm slated to go right now. I don't know. There's something about like meetings don't bother me so much in the sense that it's like kind of everybody sitting there. I'm not sure how like the holiday party will go, but at the same time, I know there's certain people that'll probably be showing up that I want to see and I haven't seen in a while. So, assuming I go, we won't have a live stream, and I'll do what I did last time because that seemed to be relatively popular, which is like some kind of common questions and doing a short video as opposed to like an hour of work. Right, the live stream, but doing kind of some question and answer session stuff that comes out of my most commonly seen stuff in comments or emails or what have you. Although if somebody has like a really awesome idea other than that, who knows? we might switch it up a little. So something will come out next Tuesday. It'll either be a live stream if I choose to stay home, or we'll get that. And then I'm actually taking some time off around Christmas, so I'll have, in theory, some extra time to get caught up again. Because I'm ever behind. My work has gone a little nuts. It's supposed to finally get quiet basically next week. And then I just got news today that like we're going to get prototype piece of hardware in the week of Christmas, and we only have the week of Christmas to do some work on it. So yeah, so much for that being quiet thing, right? What's the next thing? Okay, the only other thing I'll talk about real briefly, and I probably need to do this as a video, but the aquatic horticulture program, I basically haven't heard from my dev in a little over a month and a half. And I've been trying very actively to get in touch. Because that person moved out of state, for one, started a new job. And I know she's kind of busy, but at this point, right, like I'm trying to get stuff done. I was hoping to have stuff done by the end of the year. Haven't heard so much as a peep. So it's leading me to believe that, like, I probably have to hire a different developer and start from some level of ground zero. Not necessarily ground zero, right? Because I have a lot of stuff established. It's just I have to like effectively start over with a different developer and probably like find. There are companies that do this kind of stuff that aren't horrifically expensive, that I can hire and will be a significantly faster turnaround. Originally, I picked like a single developer who was local because I wanted somebody who'd kind of buy in and be a little more passionate about it long term, and somebody I could go back to over and over again and kind of continuously evolve things, where it's a lot harder to do that with some of the small firms that do this kind of work. So, yeah, that's fun, right? So, we'll be probably flushing more of my YouTube revenue down the drain. What little I make. Ah, man. All right. Oh, man. We're seeing some folks I haven't seen in a while. One, it's going to be so hard to get used to Joe Davis's new name because I'm so used to seeing just Joe Davis. But I'll get used to it. I promise you. I like it, though. I like the avatar. And then Sean, the Shelly super nerd, is back. Haven't seen you in a while, buddy. Mike, Fish Tank Barn. Thanks, buddy. Pre-Christmas vacation, so you use all your vacation days fund. I definitely won't use all my vacation days. I'm actually only using, I think it's 2. Yeah, because I'm doing some work from home. Basically, because now some information I got at work today, I'll be remoting in to check in on my team in the morning and in the afternoon. So basically, I'll spend like an hour at work every morning at my house. So, slacking off in shorts and a t-shirt. And then in the afternoon, toward the end of their day, making sure that nothing's like horrifically on fire and I don't have to, scramble. So, but we have a lot of stuff in place already at my work because holidays, there's a lot of people taking vacation and stuff like that. So we've been planning for like holiday vacations for the last month, basically. And my team is probably the most equipped to handle it because we're the most kind of like lightweight and agile in the way that we work. Yeah. Fun times. But yeah, my goal is to do something that people have been screaming at me for a while. So during some of that vacation time, I'll have extra time to film. So I can film some things and maybe get some stuff out that people have been screaming at for a while because I don't get the time to film it the way I would like to. There's that. Let's get on topic, though. How I keep fish, how that's changed, and why. I think. Okay, I will comment. Igor is just like, or you could just take some time off. I'm sure it's supposed to be Igor. I said Igor. This is how you know that I played certain games. This is the way I pronounce certain things unintentionally because of my gaming history. Anyway, doing YouTube stuff is fun. And doing fish stuff and catching up on that is tedious but zen-like. Does that make sense? We'll talk about that in a sec. So anyway, how I keep fish has changed, right? Oh, it is Igor. Perfect. I get worried that I pronounce things wrong, and I don't want to, because then, I don't want to sound like your typical American idiot. Even though I am one. Oh, man. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. When I first got back into the hobby, right, I had this lovely little flex behind me, which we did a video on that recently. I had my big community tank downstairs, and when I first was putting that tank together, my thought was I was going to do lots of small schooling fish, so your tetras, your danios, especially danios. I really love danios. And I watched a video where it's a tour of Gary Lang's fish room, and that just warped my world, right? But my first dip into rainbows was this big mixed tank. So, I had a couple of this and a few of that and like 5 of these and one of those and one, right? It was very much like mixed, but thankfully rainbows do okay like that. They're actually very good in being in mixed groups. Just don't try to breed them that way, of course. But, they survive very well that way, and they do very well. They're very, they're not very judgmental about what kind of rainbow is with them. As long as it's a rainbow, they're happy. And that's changed over time. So this isn't just about maintenance. It's the way that I design my tanks, right? There's a point in time when I was really into plants for profit, and I was doing all sorts of rare plants beside easy plants because I wanted to cater to a lot of different people. I wanted those people who were like looking for cool, your red plants or this or that or whatever kind of more interesting stuff is out there. Candy Overhauls used to like regularly ask me for Pogostemon erectus, and I sent her quite a few batches of it. It's plants like that aren't hard, but they're kind of like the medium tier, right? During that time, I would keep more complex plant arrangements that required a lot more of my time, and the more that I have gone, both lost some of my time because of my work schedule, and the more that I've just kind of matured as a fish keeper, the more that I have gone to simpler setups. And what I mean is this: things that don't require really, really intense effort, and continuing down a path of less and less species in a tank, but in better numbers. So I used to keep these big mixed groups of rainbows. There's color all over the place, right? And now you can look at something like my Running River tank, and it's just the Running River rainbows. And like a couple algae eaters, and that's it. It focuses on this one beautiful species of fish. The guppy mansion. It's one guppy strain in the hundreds, right? There's things like this that like I've pulled back on the diversity inside of my tanks and focused on appreciating one thing or two things to their max, right? And where like early in the hobby, Bentley would never do that. Would never do that. Because even if my goal was to say keep like discus, right? Originally when I got back in the hobby, my thought was I'm going to keep discus. I never had him as a kid. I always loved him as a kid. I didn't know about rainbow fish yet. I'm going to do discus. And even then I was like, oh, I'll get one of this and one of that, and I'll get a pigeon blood or two, and I'll get a blue powder blue, and I'll get a Marlboro red, and I'll do with this. Nowadays, I would do more like what Master Breeder Dean has. I would look for a single group of, not necessarily specifically have to be wild caught, but something closer to wild discus in coloration. Because there's something really enjoyable about going a little bit back to nature for me now and being unified, seeing closer to those more natural behaviors because it's a group of all the same fish. And I think one of the things that really got me going this route, other than the guppies, was when I got my Kochu tetras. When I got my Kochu tetras, right? Corey it took him 6 months to find those fish, and that was like, I think it took like total it was like 7 months from first thinking I wanted them to like actually getting them. And he ordered them for the store. He ordered 100, and they lost a few during quarantine, but they'd otherwise gotten through their quarantine and were relatively good. And I remember I was thinking, oh yeah, I'll get like 25 or 30 of them. That way I got a big group, right? And I looked at the fish at the store. They were still in the quarantine room. Like I occasionally get to kind of cheat because Robert and I are pretty good buddies, and he'll take me in the quarantine room when he's something interesting he really wants to show me. And we're sitting in the quarantine room at the co-op, and he's like, yeah, so these are them. It's like, I know they're still a little stressed out. They're not fully colored up. Plus they're kind of young, so they're not full sized yet. And I, even then, stressed out, I was just looking at him. I was like, yeah, I'm not just getting 25 or 30. I was just like, he's like, how many do you think you're in here? He's like, I don't know. There's probably 85, 90, rough guess. I mean, we lost a few. I'm not 100% certain. I was like, cool. Just bring me up for all of them. Hey, they did me a deal because they ordered them for me, and if I'm going to take them all in one batch, they don't have to worry about selling them slowly on the floor. They would do me a little deal. most local fish stores that are not your Petco's will do that for you, right? So I think he only charged me for like 55 or 50. I paid the retail price but only charged for so many and then got the rest. So effectively I paid, a reasonable price. Got a deal, which was kind of nice. And when I got them home and got them in a tank, I had a dedicated tank that was just them and some, I think a couple small reticulated Siamese algae eaters. I remember just sitting and watching them. And we tried this like crazy, me and my roommate at the time tried this crazy wood setup, and we're just sitting and watching them. It's just like, dude, these fish have been here for 2 days. They're already looking stellar. Stellar. And I know it was then where I started shifting my gears and thinking like, what if I did this with more of my fish? What if every 40-gallon breeder I put together is just one species of fish going forward, unless I have to group things together because I run out of space. Right? How much different will their behavior be? How much more will I appreciate that fish? And that really was a turning point. And then when I got the guppies especially, it was like, oh yeah, no, I just got this big acrylic tank used from a buddy of mine. I got a great deal on that tank. I'm going to put these guppies that I got from Leanne and I'm going to put them in this big, huge tank. And I'm just going to let them go hog wild. This is going to be their mansion. And the more that I've done those things and like even simplified my plants down, right? I used to do these like diverse numbers of plants, it'd be 15, 20, 30 species of plants in some cases in a tank. I started paring it down to like 5, 10 in my plant growing tanks, right? Not really growing a whole lot of species of plants, but letting them take over and grow in and be more robust, have more space, take up more room, and getting these bigger fields of singular plants. And now you see some of my tanks, there's just huge fields of like Java fern or crypts, right? And it's only like 1 or 2 species. And they look amazing because it's just letting nature do its thing. And the more that I have like shifted to that mentality of like, let nature do its thing, the more I've appreciated what I have. I can sit in my retirement tank, as I call it now, and watch my like mixed group of rainbows. And the thing that I focus on the most in that tank, funny enough, is the group of 8 roseline sharks. Because they're in the highest number of a single species, and I see cooler behavior from them because of that. And don't get me wrong, I love the rainbows that are in there. They're all my old boys and girls, and they'll be there until it's their time. But I find like when I go sit, I look at like the Guppy Mansion, the Running River tank, where my Rubrostriata are, or where some of the other, like the Centenniensis, right? And it's just a singular species of fish. I appreciate them in a way different way than I do with my mixed tanks. I know that like when I can do my garage fish room, that's what's going to happen, is basically all the tanks are going to be single species. And yeah, a lot of it's because I'm going to be breeding and raising fish. But even the display tanks will really focus on 1 or 2 species of fish and like a small maintenance crew to go with them. That's it. Because the more that I do that, the more that I appreciate those fish. And the more that I get to see their more natural behaviors. And that's the thing that I appreciate the most. That's what I've come to love the most in the fish hobby. That's the biggest thing that's changed. Other than that, I think like I do less water changes than I used to. But I still have kind of a regiment of what I do based on the tank. So like tanks that are really heavily planted, they'll get topped off regularly. but they only probably get a big water change once every 3 to 4 weeks. It depends on the tank. And I pay attention to parameters. That tells me a lot of things, right? But there's also things like, tanks that are bare bottom tanks. They get more regular water changes because they don't have the plants in there doing all that extra work, keeping the nitration control, and they don't necessarily have the substrates that help buffer them, or maybe they don't have as much crushed coral in to help buffer them as long, so they kind of need more frequent water changes. Things like that, right? There's little stuff that's just like shifts in my maintenance schedule, and some of that's because I have more tanks than I used to, so it's harder to do a weekly water change on 20 tanks than it was when you had 5, right? When it was just one room with 5 tanks and like 2 of those tanks are kind of big, it's easy to do a weekly change. I just pop something on YouTube and listen to it through my phone and walk around with it in my pocket like a speaker and just doing my water changes. But when it's like 4 rooms in my house have fish tanks and there's a bunch of them all over the place, that's a lot harder to do a weekly 50% water change, right? It just takes a lot more time. So things have shifted based on my schedule. But as my knowledge base has grown too, I identify things better because I understand, I've seen more stuff, I understand more things. So I know just by looking at certain things when I'm pushing certain limits and I need to make adjustments. Or when I'm just going to be like, oh yeah, I did my water change on that tank about 3 weeks ago. It's good for about 1 more week. Then I need to do a good, solid water change. Or I need to clean the pre-filter on that tank. The flow's slowing down, right? So I need to go and get the sponge off the intake and get that bad boy cleaned out so that it stops inhibiting the flow. But the rest of it is doing its job just fine. Little things like that, right? It's things that, instead of just doing it like regimented, I have to do it like this, it's become things that I identify by just looking at them. Because my knowledge base is significantly more than when I started. That's the other change, right? And I think a lot of us do that. So that's my story. But I want to dive into a few things. There's some stuff in chat I want to hit. There's some questions too. We'll get to questions and answers in just a second. So Villa Eclectic, when I set up the big tank, it started out common community fish, but was always supposed to end up with discus. Cool. Yeah, so I originally wanted to do discus and some danios and stuff. And then I saw rainbow fish and it was game over. Oh man. Luis 500, how many nanofish, celestial danios, Boraris, Rasbora, green neon tetra could I keep in a 10-gallon with some cherry shrimp? It depends on your water change and your filtration, right? Because they're fairly small fish. You could probably keep quite a few, but if your plan is not to water change every 3 days or once a week, then the number of fish you want to keep in there is less, because you also want to account for the shrimp colony. You don't want them to cause such a significant change in biocapacity depending on filtration. If you're only going to filter this with a sponge, I wouldn't do more than maybe 8 to 10 of those small fish. You're only on a 10-gallon. You've only got so much water. And you've got the cherry shrimp, too. Cherry shrimp, while a lot hardier than some of the other shrimp, they still don't want to deal with ammonia spikes and stuff. That's still going to be bad for them. So you want to try and make sure that everything is within a relatively easy maintenance schedule for yourself. You don't want to keep so many fish that you need to be changing water every 3 days or every 2 days. You just don't want to, right? It's because then you run a risk that if you put that off, maybe you're on vacation, maybe you're working a lot, maybe you're in school, you're dealing with a lot of work at that time, you're getting close to finals and stuff like that, and stuff slips. You don't want to all of a sudden have some kind of massive crash occur, whether it's you get a big ammonia spike and then it crashes all your parameters or what have you, all because you couldn't maintain this intensive maintenance schedule because you really, really, really overstock a small tank. Now, they're small fish. They don't create a ton of waste, but you're still got to keep in mind, you want to keep a shrimp colony with those fish. So, I wouldn't push it too hard, but yeah, you could probably keep 8 to 10 of them without really thinking too hard. And if you wanted to go a little bit higher, you probably could. Just make sure that you have some reasonable filtration. If you're just doing a small sponge with something like the Nano USB pump, which doesn't have a huge amount of flow, don't push your parameters too high. Don't push too hard. Don't push too many number of fish. Keep it easy. Do what you're willing to maintain long term. Not what you're willing to maintain for the first month, what you're willing to maintain long term. If you're willing to do a water change a day for 5 years, then you could go hog wild and crazy. I wouldn't personally suggest that, right? But do what you think is reasonable with weekly maintenance if you're going to do weekly maintenance. If you're only going to do maintenance every 2 weeks, have a really good plant load and keep your numbers kind of light. Make it easy on yourself. There's one other thing that I saw, other than us all yelling at YouTube and their things. There's one other thing that I saw related to the topic, other than I got a question from US Scaper that I'll answer. Don't worry. Don't worry. I got you, man. I've seen it. A couple times you posted it. I saw it. Oh, Shot's going to send me an email with some updates. Uh-oh. I feel like I should be worried. I feel like I should be worried. So from Joe Davis, actually, in the 2 short years since I've entered the hobby, I've toned back on the hardscape because I started seeing detritus traps. Yeah. And certain plants do the same thing. Your carping plants are like a massive trap for detritus too. Can be crazy. Stephen P., you can pry my live bear mosh pit from my cold dead hands. Oh man, you jokers. All right, so let me answer a couple of questions. So there was the thing of, do I think that the pink flamingo tissue cultures are viable? Yes and no. I know, so helpful, right? So here's what I'll say about those. They are viable, but typically only I have seen reasonable success, which I mean is like a number of them all doing well, growing out to the point of where they start producing their own child plants in high CO2, high light setups. They can survive, but you'll typically lose a few in other setups, but to really make them thrive, it's usually been in higher level CO2, and I don't mean like insane CO2, but just more like, at least 30 parts per million, right? If you're using a drop checker and stuff like that, or you're doing it the fun way to do all that stuff. And usually relatively high light, because that's how you maintain that strong pink color, is it really does require high light. I'm not a big fan of like personally pushing it that hard. I much prefer getting like the potted pink flamingos, like the stuff that Co-op sells and a few other places sell, as opposed to tissue culture. Yes, you get significantly less number of plants, but you get one healthy plant. And one healthy plant at size is much easier to get thriving than a bunch of small, naturally genetic defect tissue culture plants, right? That's how you get pink flamingo. It's a genetic defect, so it's inherently a weaker plant than the rest of the Wendellii species. It's tough. I think if you really want pink, go find. I say this a lot. Maybe it's because I'm spoiled because I own it, but find Jacobsoni pink. That plant will give you some pink. Yeah, it's not like the flamingo pink on the whole leaf, but it'll give you this beautiful stripe of pink in the center of the leaf. And then some extra reddy pink tones around the rest of the leaf. It's way more robust to plant. Way more robust. Because it's more naturally occurring. It's not something that was caused in a farm as a genetic defect. Just my thoughts. My thoughts there. Pink flamingo's a pretty plant, though, and I get why people love it. I have a love-hate relationship with that plant. Yeah. All right. Kingfisher's Catch, a.k.a. Joe Davis. Do you think your sway to wild types could be attributed to catch locations of rainbows? 100%. Part of it is because in appreciating rainbows and how basically there's every color you can ever imagine naturally, I've come to appreciate that natural fish, and the other thing that's really done this, I'll say this, is my Leopoldi angels. There is just something to natural, like, not line-bred fish where you see interesting behaviors and quirks and colors and patterns and things like this that they seem almost more astonishing that nature provides that. When you look at like a line-bred guppy, and like I have a line-bred guppy and I think they're beautiful and I love them to death in my blue Hawaiian Moscows. But if I look at all these crazy things that are coming out of Thailand and all these incredible guppies that are out there, and I'm just like, yeah, but they're not very robust. And like my Leopoldi angels, which are wild caught, they're tanks. They're tanks. They're so tough. A lot of my rainbows that are, you know, from all sorts of different wild locations and really aren't that many generations in captivity, they're fairly tough fish. They can deal with quite a lot. Except for in the case of rainbows, they're horrible when it comes to fish TB. That's just one that like rainbows in general don't do well. But you know, like even my my Kochu tetras were wild caught, and they were beasts. I got 4.5, 5 years out of all of them, except for the occasional one that like jumped, because they're kind of like rainbows. They're really aggressive when they go to food, and they can kind of accidentally jump out of your tank when they're not trying to necessarily. But and if they do that when you're not paying attention, or they do that in the middle of the day, you're not there. That's bad news bears for that poor little fish. But you know, they lived really healthy, robust lives, and I basically saw no health issues in them until they started getting very old. Until they all started turning about what I had them for 3.5 to 4 years, and our estimation was they were younger fish, but that doesn't mean that they were like young. They just weren't huge, so they were probably like 6 months. For a tetra, you get 3.5, 4 years. That's a pretty good feeling, at least for the small tetras. And it was only then that I started to see some little stuff here and there. But for the most part, it would mostly be like, oh, that guy is just kind of old, right? It's just like, yeah, a little worse for wear, but not like oh, it's this disease. It was just like, it's just an old fish. And the more that I engage with slightly more natural fish, the more that I appreciate them. There's certain like line bred things that I like. Like I love like designer clownfish, for example. Like I don't keep saltwater, but I love staring at designer clownfish because I just think they're so incredible. And I love a lot of the guppy strains, but at the same time, it's like I know that a swift breeze kills half those fish nowadays, and it drives me crazy that that's the case, because when I was a kid, guppies were practically bulletproof. You'd go get mutt guppies, or things we consider mutt guppies now. Those were your fancy guppies back then, and they were tough as nails. You didn't even heat the tank half the time. You just kept them at room temperature. They didn't care. They were fine. They were fine. Nowadays, you do that, and they're just like, plop, dead. It's like, nope, we're not like at 78, 80 degrees. We're not happy. I was like, well, that's not so fun. Or like a lot of our wild fish they just handle that kind of stuff. You know, they just can do things a lot better. It's kind of incredible that like we think of wild caught fish as more fragile, but they tend to be tougher in a lot of cases. Not all, but in a lot of cases. U.S. Scaper, best marketplace for rare plants. That's kind of a loaded question, because like the real answer to that is finding like the super nerd hobbyists who keep rare plants naturally and getting into those circles, but it's hard to get into those circles. So I would say places like Hanaquatics, Boost Plant. You used to be able to get a reasonable amount of rare stuff from certain other people, but I don't like their business practices, so I won't endorse them at all. But I would say like the two best are probably Hanaquatics and Boost, as far as some of the rarer stuff. But getting like the really, really rare stuff, that comes down to a lot of things. Like there are some Etsy sellers that sell some pretty rare stuff. You can find stuff on eBay. Getting in the right circles of people, like I'm in a group that I had to mute their conversation because they chatter so much, and I just can't get that many alerts while I'm at work. But you know, I'm in a group on Facebook with people like Kara Wade and a bunch of other like really, really crazy crypt nerds. And these are people who are like, yep, we're the people who collected that one thing once, and now its habitat's been destroyed since then, and there's only us have this. And and I have some of those plants like just hidden away, basically in my tanks, and sometimes I think it's not worth the cost, because a lot of times it's like, okay, yeah, you want one of this, it's going to be $100. It's like, that's a little rich, because I know you're growing it just fine. So I don't know. It depends on like how rare you're trying to go. If you're trying to go super rare, you really just want to start fishing around like Facebook and some of the rare plant nerd groups. They're out there. Some of them you can join. They're like, you can ask to join them. And then you can get into some of those small circles as they get to know you and interact with you. But if you're just in there like, I want to buy rare plants, they're probably not going to help you. They kind of have to know how you are, because a lot of those plants are so rare that some of those people keep that they don't want to send it to anyone unless they know that that plant's going to survive with a like reasonable high expectation, until they've done this enough to proliferate it as a like just in case around their own group before they start opening it up to more people. And that's where you start getting some of the rare, crazy rare crypts starting to circulate slowly but surely, and eventually they make it to like a local fish club or something like that. It's tough. Fighting like rare plants is always a tough one. And a lot of that tends to be things that like, how much money do you really want to spend? Because it gets painful. When is the giveaway for your fish room tour? Oh god. Oh man. Oh man. I'll eventually do one, but it's one of those things where it takes a lot of time, man. It really does. It takes a lot of time to shoot it the way I'd like to shoot it. Hell, Lady Diane, I wish I'd heard that speech prior to getting 7 tanks. Oh, apparently Co-op will no longer have Pink Flamingo. Womp womp. Well, hope you got in when you could. Jeez. Kelly Foreman. I have heard that Pink Panther and Pink Flamingo, they're the same thing. Yep. So, the difference is that Pink Flamingo was originally done by a farm in Europe, and I think it was Tropica's farm that had the first mutation occur, that defect mutation that caused Pink Flamingo, and they started propagating it from there. Pink Panther is the same mutation, but happened through natural occurrence in one of ADA's farms, which is the only reason why they call theirs Pink Panther and why it's called Pink Flamingo from most of the rest of them, which I think it was Tropica that did it first. I'm not 100% on that, but it's the same plant. It's a Wendetii species that has the same basically genetic defect mutation that causes that coloration. Just grown from different farms through kind of the same method, as opposed to taking a clipping of it from one and moving it to a different farm and growing it out. That's the story on that plant. That's the story. Catch up on chat. Sean, you're missing a group of fish from that list. Hey, man. Calm down. Calm down. Shelly's will return to my house at some point. Joe's got a question. This could be good. Oh, and then chat jumps on me. You son of a... Is it possible to imagine my 8-foot, 180-gallon filled with Melanitania praecox, Bozemanii, and Pseudomygil furcatas with baby Corridores venezuelos on the bottom? Yeah, I think you totally can do that. At that big of a tank, yeah. And especially because, for the most part, you're not doing any really big ones, especially if you get like the Aves Creek Bozemanii, because they're smaller Bozemanii. Then nobody's too big. Definitely can do that. Definitely can do that. Definitely. Oh no, Bob Purcell. I think Han Aquatic shut down. It just shows you how long it's been since I've looked for like rarer plant options. Rarer plant options. I'm reading another comment ahead, and then yeah, my brain's just It's out there. Well, is that really like Han Aquatic shut down? Wonder if they got in trouble. Still has stuff looks like through Facebook, maybe? I don't know. Okay, last post was a while ago. Oh. Did Han go to, like, Coral instead? I don't know. Anyway, we'll get off that. I could look, like, I mean, I used to know a few places to find rare plants, but that's probably all changed nowadays. But yeah, there's a plant auction on Facebook where hobbyists sell it. Prices can get high, so be prepared to pay. But yeah, there's stuff out there. It's just you gotta be willing to throw out a bunch. For me, I don't know. The more I dove into rare plants, the more I kind of didn't like it. And I think part of it was because it was like, oh, here's this rare plant, and every time I don't do well with it, I feel miserable because that's like $50 to $100 just flushed down the drain. Where if I spent that much on a like kind of uncommon plant, right? It's something that like, yeah, people have really cracked the code on, and they're out there. You just don't see them in like your average store. I would get a ton for the amount of money, and I'd have a lot better chance to do well. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. See, you're already going to like levels of stuff that I just don't. I don't want to dive into. It's just too much work. Too much work, man. Let's see here. But yeah, I mean, there are people who like totally into that, right? They want those hyper rare plants. They want that crazy next challenge. Michael, what in your opinion is the best Bucephalandra? How to prevent algae on it? Which is your favorite if you keep any? I keep quite a few different versions of Bus. I like a lot of the larger leaf species. So my probably current favorite is either Black Marble or Silver Stein. They're both really interesting as far as just the sheen that comes on the leaf, and because they're a slightly larger leaf, you actually get to see that more. I found that the more I go toward the bigger buses, I can tend to give them different light that makes it easier to control algae. Realistically, the best way to control algae on them is to like have a ton of shrimp and let them do their work. But you know, if you keep rainbows, you can't keep a lot of shrimp, so you run into certain problems. I've never really had too horrific an algae problem. I'll get like little spots of algae, and that doesn't bother me at all. But Bus, for the most part, especially a lot of the smaller leaf species, really do well in high light. And then at that point, it's about having reasonable flow to make sure that you know, microscopic detritus doesn't really settle too much on them and create things for the algae to really go hog wild on. That tends to be what I've found the most success with, is give them a little flow. Because they live in river and stream systems naturally, so they really appreciate flow. And reasonable amounts of CO2 goes a long way. CO2 goes a long way with Bus. It really speeds up the growth process, coloration, all that kind of stuff. All those things. I see Dr. Black in the stream. That would make me assume that the man is streaming tonight. I would assume so, right? We're having a beverage with you, buddy. Right. Xander Doo-Doo. I always love that name. I always get a little internal laugh. I can't help it. That's like the 10-year-old child in my brain. I've seen some really awesome rare plants on Etsy. Glad you mentioned that. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, Etsy can be interesting. The problem is, like, what you don't necessarily know about, like, Etsy and eBay sellers is how well they're going to ship. So, an example, Joel Corvus Oskin, right, my buddy, he's ordered off Etsy and eBay before. He's gotten quite a few different species, and like some people ship really, really nicely, and others just like it's a miracle some of those plants survived shipping. So that's kind of the toss up. You don't necessarily know how well they're going to ship, because you're talking hobbyists, right? You're not talking professional plant companies, but you can find some crazy stuff on there. I really wish that like my previous store to find rare plants is unfortunately gone now, but that's things change. That's just the nature of, especially heavily hobbyist driven business like this. Niche rare plants aren't something that like keep a business alive. That's more of like what a hobbyist does for fun. Just that's the nature of the beast. Do. Whoa. Oh, Kelly Foreman reports on Aves Creek being smaller are mixed. All I can say that owning mine for 16 months might hurt chonkers. But do you give them a pretty big tank? I'm just curious because, like, I think it depends on the size of the tank they're living in, right? I know that, like, Hoon Aquatics aren't, like, huge. They're just, I think, like, Ayumaru Bozemanai, right? And those guys get massive. Those boys get thick. And then I see, like, Aves Creek, and for the most part, I've seen mostly, like, 3-ish inch fish. 3.5. They're not, like, huge boys, but they still got some size to them. They're a Bozemanai, so they're going to be a little broader in the body. They're not going to be quite as thin as some of the other, some of the Melitania species can be, but they're still chonky. But if you give them lots of food, they're going to be like that too. Gary Duncan, when breeding fish for genetics, how do you know if the male or female carries the dominant gene for like a hyphen per se? All right. You ready for the answer? It's going to tell you everything. I don't know. It's terrible, I know. So, in live bearers, for the most part, that's actually male. The males dominate a lot of those genes. So when we're looking at things like that, it's almost 100% on the male. And really, that also pairs down to a lot of catfish, too, especially when it comes to plecos. The male tends to drastically influence a lot of those kind of features. Let's call them features, right? So it's not 100% male, but that's where I've seen it most commonly. Now, in species like your tetras and things like that, I'm really not sure because I've never dived that deep, or I don't have friends that are that nerdy that have just like babbled that stuff at me, and I've kind of like gleaned information from them. But in a case where most of the times I've seen things where like you care about a hyphen or plecos or some kind of live bearer, and that's almost always dominated by the male in those pairings, and the females have a lot less influence on those kind of appearance-based genetics. Or structural genetics in the case of like hyphen, right? I'm sure that somebody like you start getting into your people like Eric Bodrock, or in the case of rainbows, guys like Marcel and Gary Lang, you're super aficionados on particular types of fish. You'll get better information than like from the random Chucklehead X like Bentley, but. What I've noticed is, like, for an example, my friend Alyssa, right, Alyssa Bentley, she's done a lot of stuff, and she's noticed a lot of things with her particular, like, her favored male, who she calls Lemon Cakes, in her plecos. Anything that she breeds with him always comes out with certain genes that come from him, so, like, long fins, certain things like this, right? But when she does it with other males, it's not necessarily the same. So it's interesting how it can shift a little bit, but it seems to be based on the male, certain characteristics occur more likely or all the time. In the case of live bears especially, like your platies and your guppies especially, it's like almost 95% on the male as far as like all of the characteristics that they pull forward. Coloration, pattern, all that kind of stuff, it's almost purely from the male. There's very little that comes from the female in those particular species. That's what I know. Beyond that, it's a I'm not that nerdy, man. I'm only mostly nerdy. I'm not genetics level nerdy. Oh man. Oh man. Okay, we're back to normal. Raphael. Bentley, when you have time to consume YouTube content, oh, what channels do you find yourself drawn to? Ooh, lordy. I could get spicy fast. So there's a few independent news oriented channels that I watch pretty regularly. There's a lot of tech YouTube that I watch pretty regularly, and there's some fish YouTube that I watch pretty regularly. And then it depends on what's kind of been like my cup of tea for the month, if you will. So for an example, when Diablo 2 Resurrected was about to release, or in its early release, I was consuming a lot of Diablo related content to like refresh my brain on a game I hadn't played in 20 years, right? So this is just getting myself back to understanding like how things function in the game. So I was watching a lot of YouTubers who do that stuff. When new pieces of like when the next generation of processors from a particular company like AMD or Intel, either one, comes out, I'll be watching a lot more tech YouTube during that period of time because I'm getting myself familiar with the things in the pipeline that I don't necessarily know at the moment. Now, in the case of Intel, I know a lot of that stuff from when I worked at Intel because they're starting to now release stuff that I had been working on. But, you know, it's the tail end of stuff I was working on, and its very early development is now live to the public. So from here on out, when Intel does a new major release, I'll probably spend a couple days watching tech YouTubers getting details on that kind of information because I like to keep myself pretty well known on like the PC market just because it affects my career, right? Other than that, you know, like I said, there's some daily news that I like to watch, and is there anything else I watch regularly that's like not? Because the fish channels I watch regularly shifts from time to time. I kind of constantly watch Co-op, just because, you know, it's my local fish store. They're a big channel. They do a lot of things in a certain way. It's just inherently interesting to me. I love watching Dan's fish because I just like what that guy does. But you know, I watch a lot of my other like the people I consider my friends. So like I'll watch Alex from Secret History for a while. I'll catch Jason at Redfish Bluefish, and I'll watch them in spurts. I'll watch Jason from Jadron Aquatics. I'll watch Primetime Aquatics, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll watch 3 or 4 of their videos in kind of in a row and catch up on what I haven't watched in a little while, and then I'll move on to something else. And it just depends on my time. And a lot of it's just sitting like background audio in my ears. Like when I walk my dog in the morning, I have some kind of YouTube on, and that's just the audio I listen to while I'm walking. And when I'm at work, I have audio in my ears while I'm doing all of the stuff that I need to do. Right? It's a lot of it's I very rarely am watching visuals. It's more audio. So if I take the time to watch the visuals, that should tell you something, right? So an example would be when Jimmy puts out a video on his channel. Whenever I watch it, it gets my very full attention. So like an example would be he put out a video recently and I spent my lunch break watching that video. I just shut the rest of the world out. Except for like every time one of my people on my team ask me a question while I'm eating lunch at my desk. Because I don't really get time to eat lunch elsewhere. I have enough stuff that if I want to get out at a reasonable hour, I have to eat at my desk. And that's just a matter of like, I want to run my team with a certain amount of efficiency and not have all of us work late. So that's what I do. But for the most part, it gets a lot of my attention. Like I also watch, I watch some like cooking channels every once in a while. I watch some really random stuff at times. That goes back to a lot of other hobbies I used to be in. Like I'll still watch content for Magic the Gathering every once in a while because I still sort of kind of play that game. I haven't been able to in a while because of the pandemic, but you know, it's one of those things where it depends. I kind of watch things in little bursts, and then there's a few things that I just kind of always watch every day in a small amount, and most of that tends to be news related, and that usually is independent news sources because then I actually get like more globally interesting news as opposed to just like slanted news that's either one leaning or the other leaning, and I don't like either of them typically because they're all only telling part of the story and they're not telling the whole story. And that's what disturbs me as somebody who used to work in radio and radio news for a short period of time. I don't like the slant. I don't like the bias. I don't like when you're not being factual to people. It drives me nuts. And yeah, that's like a long-winded way to say, I watch a lot of stuff. And it's real random. Bob Purcell, what plant would be good to provide shade to some Anubias and Crypts in a CO2-injected 40 breeder with some higher light plants on the other side? Tried floating water sprite right now. So you can do some Java Fern, right? You can get bigger Java Ferns. They do a good job of shading stuff. I, in general, like some of the stems that aren't, like, really dense foliage. So an example would be, like, Ludwigias, right? Where they don't have... So, like, Pocostemon, some of the cooler ones, like, have really dense foliage. Rotalas can create really dense foliage because they grow so robustly. But a lot of, like, your Ludwigia repens, Atlantis, Ovalis... they have bigger and less frequent leaves, or even like Bacopas, right? That they provide a little bit of shade, but not too much shade. Floating plants do a great job too. You just have to like basically fence them in so that they don't cover everything, or just really actively remove the excess. But those would be like the rate I would go. Those are the things that I'd look at. I like using a lot of those plants to shade things. And you can use Hygrophilus, too. Hygrophilus actually do a reasonable job of shading without being too crazy. Luis, what do you prefer, Phoenix Resbora or Danio Erythromicron? So, to you, I'm going to say this. Do what I do when I buy fish. Stare at both of them. Stare at each fish for 10 minutes. And then ask yourself, which one do you want to watch for an hour? Half an hour. Which of those fish do you know after 10 minutes, I know I need to look at this fish more? Because it'll be one or the other. One or the other will stand out in your mind. I know, like right now you're saying I can't choose, but trust me. If you sit and you watch a particular fish, and I mean in person, if you can... If you got a shop that has both, watch them for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then go watch the other one. And just be honest with yourself and ask yourself, which one do I want to see more right now? I've looked at him for 15, 20 minutes, but I need to see this fish more. That's the one. It'll stick out in your head. There'd be that one between the two of them. You'd be like, man, I like both these fish, but you know what? I really want to go look at this one more. I just want to sit and watch because I enjoy whatever X is. And maybe it's their behavior. Maybe it's their coloration. Maybe it's the way that they eat. Maybe it's the way that they swim. Whatever it may be, right? There's going to be some part of it that really grips you. Find what grips you in that fish. And when you compare them side by side, after really watching them for a period of time, you will know which one you want to watch. And that's the one you take home. Doesn't mean that you don't like both. It just means one really speaks to you. That's what I would do. Just like, you can name both those fish and I'd be like, they're both nice fish. I would pick neither of those. Because my personal taste, if I go for very small fish, is very different than yours. Right? If I'm going for fish that small, I'm looking at something completely different. Because that's what I enjoy. And I know that that's what I enjoy. So that's why I both hate and love those questions, because it lets me never answer them directly. But answer them directly with the way that I choose fish for myself. When I'm sitting there, I'm like, I want something a little bit different than like the next rainbow, right? And I do the same process every time. And I always find something that when I take it home, I'm so satisfied. And 6 months down the line, I'm so happy I picked that fish. because I always find that thing about that particular fish. After looking at a bunch of different fish, I find that one that really speaks to me, and that's the one. Josue? I'm assuming that's how it's supposed to be. Based on spelling, I'm guessing that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. Cespedes. Hi, guys. Which are your preferred woods for your aquariums? I'll answer that. I love Malaysian driftwood and manzanita. But I like the not super branchy manzanita. So I don't like the stuff that has lots of little teeny tiny twigs and sticks and all that kind of stuff, because that's basically just like a spike trap for my rainbows, and my rainbows are dum-dums. I like the stuff that's just kind of like more vine-like. I love that stuff. But I really love, personally, I love big chunks of Malaysian driftwood. I also really like the bigger, thicker chunks of cholla wood. Cholla wood, I think, is beautiful, and it gives you lots of opportunities to take small epiphyte plants and integrate it into the cholla, and it looks incredible when it grows in. Go look at my guppy mansion when I first put it together, and then look at it like 6 months later when all that Java Fern Wendelov grew into it in some of the videos, and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. It looks, once it grows in to the right point, it's just so incredible looking. And you can do that with a lot of wood, don't get me wrong, but cholla just kind of does it naturally. The only problem is cholla breaks down relatively fast, so it only lasts for so long. Kelly Foreman, my Aves Creeks in a 90 gallon, the thickest rainbows. Thick boys. But yeah, I love cholla wood. I love cholla wood. That stuff's just cool, especially if you get the big, thick, chunky pieces. Yeah. Anything that's like super tiny branchy, so like I've grown to like not like spiderwood too much. I used to love it at first, which is its azalea roots, but I loved all the weird like design that you could get out of it. But the more that I've gotten to appreciate, I appreciate like more simplistic form. I like stuff that looks like a big tree trunk and less that looks like a million little branches, right? And part of that's just like I keep big fish that are dumb, and they'll like ram into that stuff, and I don't want them like poking their eye out or doing something or ripping a scale or some dumb stupid thing. So I tend to go for bigger pieces, but then it gives me a different perspective. Like the more that I get like really kind of impressive pieces of larger wood, the more that I notice that like certain styles of aquascaping speak to me. It's like things that look like fallen trees in a forest and look like just a big, large piece. I tend to appreciate those way more than like the really robust, like lots of spidery vines and sticks and stuff going all over the place. I tend to like rock more than wood, but if I like wood, it's when it's big chunks of wood. That's when I love wood. But you might be different. You might like stuff like hornwood and spiderwood and all those like super small, really detailed stuff, where like you get the really nice like your Tom Bar manzanita. It's got all the little sticks and some bark and all that kind of stuff. You might like that stuff a lot more than me, and that might be your jam. But for me, man, probably Malaysian driftwood. Or if you could go and get like African bogwood still reasonably, that would be the other one. Just big, dark pieces of wood that look amazing, leach tons of tannins, all that kind of stuff. I love that stuff. Absolutely love it. Kelly Foreman is, just because a trait is expressed in the male does not mean it is sex linked to males. Those are different things. Look, I told you, genetics are not my thing, all right? Just saying the stuff that I've observed in time. Jesus, what do you want from me? Don't ask me genetic questions. I'm a dum-dum when it comes to that stuff. Oh, man. And we had a little jump. I'm trying to catch up. Got a bit of speed up here. Kingfisher's Catch, a.k.a. Joe Davis. What fish would you use for a Christmas ornament? I'm taking the diamond tetra because I love me some sparkle. Disclaimer, no fish were harmed. Did you see, I don't know if you guys saw, like, in Jimmy's, there's that cool art that a guy locally does. And if I were to go that route, I would do, only because it's Christmas colored, I would want the emerald rainbow and the red dragon rainbow, because then you get red and green, right? But the Juana Mensis and the multisquamata. Other than that, I think if I were going something a little different, right? Diamond Tetra is a pretty great one. I won't lie. But I would probably look at something like the female Crebensis. Just because they're such a pretty fish, especially when you get to the Tenianus versions, where you get like royal purples across their whole body and brilliant gold yellows and all that kind of stuff. I love the way those females look when they're courting. It's so pretty. It's so pretty, and the males are like, they're pretty on their own because of their patterning and their fins, but they've got nothing on the females when it comes to cribs. And that's part of why I love cribs. And as opposed to Epistos, I'd rather have cribs because I love watching the way that females color and court. It's just so much cooler. And it's kind of like rainbows, right? Where they don't show that color all the time, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom. I was like, oh, why hello. And they have a certain behavior to them and all that kind of stuff. It's something I just sit and watch, like, just anytime that my old female crib used to court her boy and be like, no, you are giving me the babies now. I would just sit and just watch her doing her little shimmy and shake and like slowly cornering him toward the cave and stuff. I loved watching it, man. It was so fun. It was so fun watching her do her thing. Raphael, if you ever need comic relief, check out Viva La Dirt League. Yeah, their D&D logic and PUBG vids are hilarious. I've seen a little bit of their stuff. Actually, if you want, occasionally there's some like League of Legends creators, because I've played a lot of League of Legends, and I'll watch that do comedic stuff. And there's some guys that do some like a really comedic D&D. I'm trying to remember there's a particular creator I really like. Hold on. So he's got a series called Animated Spellbook, and his channel is called Z Bashu. I'll actually like type it out. Actually, you know what? I'll give you one video from this guy if you're interested. But I really like his channel. He doesn't put out stuff super often because it's he has to like animate everything, and it's very fun. But it's got this one about dice that I think is hilarious. I gotta like pause this so it doesn't go loud through my headphones. But for those who are like gaming nerds too, this is just this guy's videos when he does his like animated spellbook and some of his other D&D related animated content. It's just hilarious to me. I love this guy, and when he puts stuff out, like, it's one of the things that they're all short. They're like 3-4 minutes. I watch them all the time. But yeah. Most of the time I get good laughs at like watching tech reviewers absolutely rip apart bad tech. A great example would be like Gamers Nexus, which those guys are like really, really know their stuff, and they're very technically minded. So it goes to like my more professional side of my stuff. And when they like tear apart a case for how bad its airflow is or something like that, like I just enjoy it. Like listening to extremely intelligent people rip apart a product because it has bad engineering from a professional company that should know better. It's just good times. It just makes me feel it. I just sit there and I'm like, I'm just doing that. I'm just like laughing at it like a psychotic idiot. Like a psychotic idiot. Kelly Foreman, I'm a geneticist. Well, you teach people about this stuff, Kelly. I'm going to bring you on, make you teach everybody. All right, guys, we're getting close. My good friend, Dr. Black, is up relatively shortly. Let's get a link to Mr. down in Australia there. There we go. Whoa, what a great picture for the thumbnail on this bad boy. That's a look of suspicion if I've ever seen one. Anyway, he'll be up next very shortly. We'll be ending here in just a moment. But like I said, I'll have something next week. I'm not 100% sure whether it'll be me live or whether I'm going to my Christmas party for my club, and then it'll bring something pre-recorded. But yeah. Paul Soltero, I'm at the same point with Dwarf Cichlids, looking for something a little different. Recently found Laeticara. What the heck? That sounds cool. I don't know, like, it's that and Shell Dwellers. I love Shell Dwellers. Not quite as much as Sean does. I'm sure I'm going to get a very lengthy email about Shelly soon from Sean, but I like certain shell dolers a lot just because their behavior is so interesting. Oh man, these things are cool. Liticara arguay. I'm not sure how to pronounce that last one. It's like faux Latin that I don't know, but that's a pretty fish. Now, my real question is, are the pictures like a breeding dress, or are they like this all the time? Because I see a lot of color in the back end and only a little bit of like, speckle on the front face and gill plate, but they look cool. They look cool. I like different. Different can be really fun, man. Different can be really fun. Anyway, gang, why pick just one rainbow when you can pick them all? Well, because I'm a weirdo, and I like big groups of only one type of rainbow usually. This is just how I do. But that's why I have lots of tanks, so I can own more rainbows. Anyway, gang, as always, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll probably do some stuff around Christmas. If you'll recall, last year, if you were here, we did a few giveaways at Christmas. It was a time of giving back, and we will most likely do the same. Just saying, you might want to be around for those. Try to be live, try to be live, try to be live. That's all I'm going to say. Mike the Fish Tank Barn, buddy, thanks for vacation funds. Realistically, though, the real vacation is going to be next year for the Triple Crown event. When we go to Louisville, I'm going to have some fun out there. That's where I'm really burning some vacation time. But I hope to see some of you folks there. I hope to see some of you folks in the next stream, whether that's the next week or the week after. I'm not sure anymore. Soon. Very soon. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. Bye-bye, y'all.